Hello and welcome to the Rainbow Reads LGBTQIA+ Readers Advisory for Young Adults webinar. My name is Beth Yates. I am the Youth Services Consultant in the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. And our presenter today is Jane Walters, the West Indianapolis Branch Manager at the Indianapolis Public Library. Before we get started though, since this webinar is pre-recorded, I wanted to say a quick note about library education units, aka LEUs, for Indiana library staff who might be watching this webinar recording. The webinar itself is approximately 1 hour and will be worth 1 LEU. And ISL's policy states that if you watch a recording of a webinar, you'll need to have someone in administration or HR at your library create the LEU certificate for you, because they're the ones who can verify that you watched the webinar. If you have any questions about that, you can visit the Indiana State Library's website, or you can email us at statewide-services@library.in.gov. I do also want to mention that any book lists or handouts mentioned in this webinar will be posted along with this recording on the Indiana State Library's archived webinar page. Okay, let's do this. Jane, take it away.
Thank you so much, Beth. As Beth said, my name is Jane Walters. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the branch manager of the West Indianapolis branch of the Indianapolis Public Library. You can find us on the west side over by Lilly. I'm one of the founding members of the LGBTQ+ Services Committee at the Indianapolis Public Library. You can find me on Twitter as well as Instagram, typically ranting about civil rights or cosplay stuff and things like that. These are my kitties. My black one is Pyewacket, and the striped one that's looking all cute and innocent but never actually is, that's Desolé. And I want to jump first into a little bit of Queer 101. What is LGBTQIA+? The plus is because there's so much more than that, but just the simple basics, just a real quick rundown. L is for lesbian, G is for gay, B is for bisexual, T is for transgender, Q is for queer or questioning, I is for intersex, and A is for asexual. You might also hear it referred to as ACE. It does not stand for ally. Sorry, you're not part of the rainbow. We'd love to have you as an ally, but that's not what the A is for. It is for asexual as well as ACE. There's a lot of these in here that some people don't fully understand, they don't fully grasp. Please look them up. I highly recommend it. It's a great way for you to educate yourself, and then that way you can help those around you better and be a better ally as well. So this is one of my favorite graphics. It's the gender unicorn. And I love it, not just because it's a unicorn, but because it's really simple and it's a great visual for explaining things in a super basic way so that it's easily understood. Gender identity, as you can see, is what you're thinking. It's how you think, how you identify, how you feel about yourself. You know, if you think in a more feminine way, if you think in a male way, if you think in a spectrum across that, and things like that. People sometimes find themselves in various spots along those lines. Gender expression, that's how you're presenting yourself. A lot of people consider their gender expression in what they wear, how they wear their hair, whether they wear makeup or not, jewelry, things like that. Some people, they express themselves in more feminine ways, some people in more masculine ways. Some people kind of swing a little bit back and forth, they flow back and forth, and that's not uncommon. It's a lot of times referred to as being gender fluid or gender diverse in their expression. Sometimes that can also come in with the gender identity. You might hear people consider themselves as being gender diverse in their identity, and that's okay. It's very fluid for some people. There's not that necessarily a binary for them. They're not one or the other. They're somewhere flowing back and forth depending on their mood. The sex assigned at birth, that's essentially the doctor at the hospital is like, oh, look, I see this genitalia, so they must be female or they must be male. And they mark that on the birth certificate. That's just what's assigned at birth. That's what is seen based on the physical appearance. One of the things also that it might not be quite clear, there might be both genitalia, there might be partial of one genitalia, and intersex shows up in a lot of different ways like that. Sometimes being intersex doesn't show up until in puberty, when they might supposed to be having testicles, but instead they have ovaries, that sort of thing. A lot of times, unfortunately, for kiddos that are born intersex, it's decided for them at birth, as opposed to them discovering who they are later on in life and then making that choice for themselves as if they even want to have any kind of surgery to make their genitalia look one way or the other. Some decide not to. It just varies for everybody. Unfortunately, a lot of them, the choice is taken away from them as soon as they're born. Physically attracted to is just who you're physically attracted to. You might be attracted to women or men or other genders. And then there's also emotionally attracted to. Those are two different things. You can be physically attracted to a man, but emotionally attracted to women, and like never really be emotionally attracted to men, or vice versa. There's all sorts of different ways that this works for people. I know lots of people that they're physically attracted to one gender, and they're emotionally attracted to all genders. You could also just not be attracted to anybody physically, but be attracted emotionally to one gender or many genders. It happens all across the spectrum because it is a spectrum. That's one of the reasons why I really love the fact that as far as LGBTQIA plus, it's a rainbow. A rainbow is a spectrum, and it shows up definitely in the way that people express themselves, how that their attractions, their emotional attractions, and all of that, their gender identity. It can be anywhere across that rainbow. So why are these things important? Teens who identified as transgender female reported at a rate of 30%, while teens who identified as transgender male reported at a rate of 51%. What am I talking about? Attempted suicide. I know that was very deep and very harsh right there, but it is very deep and very harsh for a lot of these kids. 67% of LGBTQ youth hear their families make negative comments about LGBTQ people. 78% of youth not out to their parents as LGBTQ hear their families make negative comments about LGBTQ people. So they're hearing about it at home. They're hearing about it at school. And they're not just hearing about it at school from their fellow students. They're also hearing about it, as you can see in this Gleason report here from 2017. They're hearing about it from the staff, the teachers, and the staff. They're hearing these negative comments from them as well. So it's everywhere around them. And the one place that it doesn't need to be is in the library. It's where we need to stand up for them and help them and be that safe space for them. I know one teenage girl who came in and we were talking. She's not out to her family. She's out to me. She's out to a couple of her friends, but none of her family. And she will talk to me in hushed whispers because she's normally there with her other siblings. And she told me once that she won't come out to her family. And I said, well, maybe, when you're 18 and you're on your own. And she said, no, not even then. And that's heart-wrenching, especially when you consider the fact that this girl is going to hide who she is until, at the very least, she moves out. And that wouldn't be until maybe she's 18. And she's 14 years old right now. So for another 4 years, she has to live with the fact of not being able to be herself around her family not being able to share the fact that she just recently broke up with her girlfriend, not to be able to share the fact that, you know, she might fall for somebody else deeply and madly in love with them. And so that's why it's important that we create these safe spaces and environments for them within the library itself, and why we represent them and show them in books, not just in June, but all the time in every display, because there's material for every single display. If you're doing something for sci-fi, there's plenty of sci-fi, high fantasy, everything else like that that include queer characters. It doesn't have to just be a big giant rainbow display of books. One of the issues that we also get into in the representation is in publishing itself. This is looking at children's literature, but in children's literature, you see that based on these numbers, the 2019 numbers from We Need Diverse Books, which is a fantastic resource. If you have not heard of them, have not looked at them, please visit them. I'll be showing their link later on in the resources as well, and be sharing that with all of the resources at the end. I'll be sending those so that there will be a handout. These numbers aren't great. They've gotten better, but they still really suck, to be quite frank. Pacific Islanders are 0.05. They're not even at 0.1%. It's really sad. Native First Nations are only 1% of children's literature. And this is in the little kids' books. It doesn't get much better in the teens. You do at least lose the animal / other, so you're not getting like animal characters as much in the teen books, but you're still getting quite a bit of misrepresentation and a lack of representation. And so that's why I wanted to dive in, and you'll notice that all of these are very beautiful colors. None of them just shout, "Hey, I'm queer," except for maybe Out Now, because the subtitle is Queer We Go Again. But nearly all of these are something that you can hand a kid and they can take it home and not have to worry about mom, dad, grandma, uncle, aunt, whoever looking at them and going, "Where did you get this trash?" So the first one I want to jump into is The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea by Maggie Tagoda Hall. And it's pirates, mermaids, and adventure. You can't go wrong with that, honestly. It's about a desperate orphan turned pirate and a rebellious imperial daughter, and they find a connection on the high seas in a world divided by colonialism and threaded with magic. So you've got magic, you've got mermaids, you've got pirates, you've got action on the sea. It's a fantastic read and lots of adventure. And they develop this really lovely connection and starting to get to know each other. And then there's the romantic aspect of it. The next one that I want to talk about is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. Leah Johnson is Indiana-based, and so is the book. It's an absolutely amazing and hilarious voice. It's incredibly recognizable in real Indiana. It's written by a true Hoosier author. It's the prom rom-com that Black and brown girls have been waiting for. And I know that there are a lot of prom rom-coms out there. They happen constantly. But it's like a lot of things. There are a lot of those books out there, but Black and brown girls haven't had them for themselves. So just because it's another prom rom-com doesn't mean that it should be overlooked. In fact, it should be more embraced and it should be more celebrated because it's finally one for Black and brown girls. It deals with some bullying, it deals with romance, it's young budding romance, it's coming of age, but it's not fully coming of age because we are talking about a senior. The next one that I want to talk about, and it's slightly younger, but also that coming of age sort of thing, is The Henna Wars. It's a sweet, sometimes bittersweet rom-com that explores the queer experience of Muslim girls and girls of color. There's a big outing scene that is uncomfortable and it's kind of scary, but it hasn't been done in books by and for queer people of color. We see it with white kids, we see it with cis kids constantly, but we don't see that in these, and it happens a lot, and it's got a lot of depth um, in which the main character is trying to explain that you can be Muslim and queer. She's living proof of it. And there's a lot of that struggle with her Bengali parents and her heritage and everything else like that, and wanting to be true to that. But then there's that pull of you need to choose. You need to choose which one you are. And you can't choose. It's not a choice. And that's made very clear in there. It's a really lovely book. The next one, we jump into like a whole completely different aspect. It's called Even If We Break. It's about 5 gaming buddies who have grown apart, and they have one last lost weekend before they go off to college. They end up trapped on a mountain during a storm, and stuff gets scary and real quick. It's got a huge amount of diversity in it as far as across the LGBTQIA spectrum. There are ace people in there. It's just, you have like a whole variety mixed in, which is lovely. And you don't normally see that with like it being like a lot of the main characters. And it's just a really good read. If you've got readers that are drawn towards those scarier aspect stories, they'll enjoy this a lot. The next one that I want to talk about is We Are Totally Normal. This one, it's about a boy named Nandan and his plans for making junior year like super chill and great. And all those plans are thrown completely for a loop. It's often awkward and kind of messy, much like a lot of teen romance can be, which makes it a little bit, it's so realistic in ways in the awkwardness that sometimes it's very uncomfortable. It's a very real look at what it's like for those whose sexuality isn't so cut and dry for them. And it questions also, is it worth throwing away something that could be great just to seem normal? Because oftentimes that choice seems to be there and you feel like you have to pick. Am I going to throw away this chance to like be with somebody that I'm attracted to and that I really like and I like being around, just so that I can kind of blend in? Is it worth it? The next one that I want to talk about is The Dark and Deepest Red. It's a dark retelling of the fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses, The Red Shoes. This is a novel that's full of magical realism that explores the meaning of queerness and gender in lush lyrical prose. I really can't speak highly enough about just how well written it is and how well it just flows. It's an amazing book, and it's one that if they are interested in those fairy tale like aspects and magical realism, this is a book to definitely pass on. And I think it's important just to take a moment here that you don't always have to pass these stories along to queer kids. You can pass them on to any kid. And it's a chance for them to also then see within the world of people that are going through these things. It can be that window for them. A great example of that is Lot's Way. It's a rich world of the everyday, of where you have homework, you've got friends, you've got pistachio ice cream, you've got all those things, but in the everyday is included magic, monsters, and legends. Alatoe can raise the ghosts of dead animals, and when her cousin that she absolutely loves is murdered in a town that once no prying eyes whatsoever. She's going to do as much prying as possible. It's a beautifully written story. It's a great look at Indigenous life. It's truly one of the own voices that stands out. Another one is We Unleash the Merciless Storm. Now, this is a sequel, and it's a sequel that deserved to be a sequel. Oftentimes you have books that are sequels that they don't stand on their own. This one really does. It's action-packed, it's smart fantasy, and I really love that the girl is choosing between love and duty in a way we rarely see female characters depicted. It's often not an option for them. The next one I want to talk about, you've probably heard some news about, and that's All Boys Aren't Blue. It's a memoir manifesto by George M. Johnson. It's a rich, heavy, and unbearably light. This is a memoir meditation on what queerness means for Black boys in America. And it's definitely worth a read. And even if you're not giving it to other kids, you should be reading it yourself, honestly, because it gives you so much insight that you often don't get. It's rarely shown quite so stark as this. The next one that I want to read that also kind of highlights something that often isn't seen, it's a Full Disclosure. It's one of the few YA books I've ever seen that centers on a character with HIV that is A, Black, and B, female. And it isn't about being punished for being queer. It's a coming up of age story with complications. And it's written by somebody that has gone through this. So this is very much like, you can't get much more own voices than that. But it's definitely one that's worth passing around and getting into the hands of other kids, because these are very real issues. They haven't gone away. HIV is still out there. It's still active. There's still people getting it every day. So it's something that they need to be aware of, and this is a really good book to kind of help shine a light on that without it being a shame on you for being gay. The next one that I want to talk about is Felix Ever After. It's an amazing celebration of a teen transgender boy that is both lyrical, challenging, and full of light and love. You rarely get books about transgender boys, and it's even rarer that you get them in YA. One of the things that I'm going to jump completely off for a bit, is that if you look even at the cover of the book, the picture with the crop top, you can see the scars from their surgery. It's very subtle, but it's there, and I think that it's one of those things that just kind of it's just another indication of just how great this book helps to represent. It's a book that celebrates, and it celebrates being instead of becoming. It's actually, and it's currently being developed for television, which I'm super excited about. I always love when things get to be showcased in literature as well. Much as I love books, but I love when it reaches other audiences that then bring them back to the book. So that's exciting. Another great one is Clap When You Land. This is a novel in verse that is stunning in the way it blends grief and love. The diversity is rich Dominican versus Dominican American, colorism, classism, and so much more. All the while weaving in the discovery of family after losing family. Someone asked me, can we subtitle this book Strong Women and How They Bond Over the Awful Things Men Do to Them? Which I think would be a fantastic subtitle, honestly. It's so true. And it's a really wonderful book that you do get to delve into these two different worlds. You discover these two different girls, their lives, and what they're going through, and then how they come together over the loss of their father, because they don't know about each other. So they don't know they have a sister. And so finding that family after the loss of family and what that means to both of them. Now, the next two are anthologies. I love anthologies. I absolutely adore them. They are like the appetizer of authors, where you get that sampler platter and you get to like try this author, try that author. And if you fall in love with them, then you can go and you can find all their other stuff that they've written. So I always highly recommend anthologies, especially to teens, that because there's still reluctant teen readers. There's ones that don't really get into books very much. They don't have the attention span for it. Anthologies are perfect for that. They're short little stories. And A Phoenix First Must Burn, it's 16 stories of Black girl magic, resistance, and hope. Now, it's an extraordinary anthology. Not all the stories are queer, but we're not going to hold that against them, because all the stories are filled with gorgeous writing, simmering voices, and richness of setting. It brings a beautiful, sometimes poignant spotlight to Black women and girls. And it truly is a must read because it is just absolutely fantastic from start to finish. The other one that I'm pretty excited about is out now, Queer We Go Again. I absolutely love the little subtitle to it. Like I said, this one might be the one that you can't just be like, hey, you know, even though you're not out to your folks, you can read this one and get away with it, because it does have queer right on the front, but that's okay. It's all queer stories by queer authors, edited by a queer author, whose agent is queer as well, and editor. So, you know, it's like as queer as you can possibly get. It's the follow-up to All Out, which was a mix of fantasy and things like that. This one is more contemporary. These are all current stories, and there's a great variety of diversity in there. You get across the spectrum of LGBTQIA, you get AIDS characters, you get trans characters, you get bi characters, you get all of the different types of characters and representation there. That is just wonderful. It's you get the representation in all of the different authors as well as within all of the different characters. And it's one of those books where all the stories, the characters just happen to be queer. That's not the primary function of each story. The focus isn't on them being bi or gay or anything like that. The focus is on the story, and the character just happens to be gay or bi or trans. One of the things that we hear a lot about is explicit content. And I think it's really important to realize that people are not explicit content. I love this graphic. These are children. There are many genders and orientation. These are children. This is not mature or explicit content. What they do, that then determines whether it's explicit content. Far too often, the fact that there are lesbian characters, it gets marked as being explicit content. Take, for example, the Henna Wars. The most intimate it gets is a kiss. And that's it. But the fact that it is lesbian, oftentimes it will be targeted as being explicit content just because it is LGBTQIA plus. And so it's important to realize that just because it is that does not mean that it is explicit. There's plenty of queer material out there that is picture books of two dads or two moms and things like that, or transgender kids. That does not make it explicit. So please keep that in mind. these are some of the organizations that are wonderful to follow for more resources. I mentioned earlier, We Need Diverse Books. It's a fantastic resource for finding lists, finding own voices, and things like that. You can follow them on Twitter and Instagram. There's LGBTQ Reads. They have their website and Twitter as well. I've got Lambda Legal in here because I do think that it is a worthwhile resource to have on hand, because oftentimes people try to push against things, and there are legal resources that you have at your disposal to push back or to defend yourself. Another really good one as far as a resource goes is Lambda Literary. That's a wonderful resource as well, and they have a Twitter that you can follow. Some of these are ones that are really good for the parents or the grown-ups, and even some of the teens, because some of the teens, they're getting old enough that they can reach out to these places as well for themselves. Some might not be, but some of them they could. There's GLAAD, which is always fantastic. There's the Human Rights Campaign. There's also Gleason, which is great for creating safe and inclusive schools. You can use a lot of those same resources for educating yourself, as well as for creating your own safe spaces within a public library as well, or a small little library. It doesn't matter. That's the great thing about a lot of these resources, that you can pull from pretty much any of them to help you create a better and more welcoming space for your kiddos. There's the Gay Straight Alliance Network, which is fantastic for those that are needing some information and help on things. There's the Trans Student Educational Resources. That's wonderful if you're dealing with trans students. That's a wonderful resource to dive into for being able to help them out. There's also locally the Indiana Youth Group, which is a wonderful organization. Currently, they are doing almost all of these resources have gone virtual for the time being because of COVID. I'm not quite sure when any of them are going to be doing in-person things again. Hopefully it'll all end soon and the kiddos can get back into there and meet folks. But it's a great place. They have a new location. They're right on a bus line. They help sometimes with transportation for the kiddos too. And it's just an incredibly safe space for them to go and be themselves and meet others that they can bond with, that they can relate to, and things like that, and kind of find their pack, you know. But they can still at least do it for the time being online through the different things that they've all moved to there, as far as like discussions and stuff as well. And then Indie Pride has also gone pretty much all virtual. Pride was canceled this year, which was a real bummer, but they moved a lot of things to focus more on online things and to help support with Black Lives Matter, which was pretty incredible. There's also the ACLU of Indiana, which you can always reach out to for various information. They do lots of trainings and things like that, which are really good. There's IUPUI LGBTQ Plus Center. They're doing a lot of online things right now that you can watch and workshops and stuff. There's Indie PFLAG, which is super helpful for families. And then there's Trinity Haven, which was supposed to open earlier this year, but everything's been kind of slowed down. They're getting there though. It's really fantastic because it is the only trans youth temporary living for transitional living, because as I said earlier, with all those numbers, the kids that are hearing all the negative things about LGBTQ plus and stuff like that, when they come out to their families, sometimes they get kicked out. just for being who they are. The majority of the teen population that is homeless are LGBTQI plus, and they're homeless because they're LGBTQI plus. So this is finally a place in which they have some place to go that can help them get their feet on the ground and get on track with their lives and not just stay homeless. So I'm really excited about when they finally get open. Do all you can to help support them and to spread the good word that they're doing. And then there's us, the Indianapolis Public Library, the LGBTQ plus services committee. We've got programs and newsletter, there's collection recommendations, so much more. We have a blog, we have a Goodreads account, so we've moved our book discussion entirely to online, so you can get to that through the blog, which will then take you to the Goodreads, and then you can post and discuss all the wonderful things with our book discussions. And then that is everything that we've got going on. So I'm hoping that you will take these books, run with them, read them yourself, share them with everyone, because they're all wonderful. There's so many more that I could have added to this list. So keep looking, keep reading. There's over 300 just queer books for kids and teens that came out just this year alone. So there's lots out there.
And Jane, were you saying that Book Riot is a good resource to keep up on some of the new books coming out?
Yes, Book Riot is also a fantastic one. They've got lists that come out. They've got all sorts of wonderful things as far as reading recommendations, different things that are coming out at each time. They're a really good one. So definitely Book Riot needs to be on the list too. I need to add that to one of the slides.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for putting this together, because that's a lot of reading.
It's well worth it. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. We're glad to have you. And I'm glad to be able to share this presentation with Indiana Library staff. And one more reminder for those of you watching this, that if you are looking for the book list or the resources, I think we're going to post the slides, which you'll be able to get to all of those links to all the resources and the book list, and they'll be posted with the recording on the Indiana State Library's website under the archived webinars. So that's it for us. Thank you again to Jane and Indianapolis Public Library for sharing her, and we'll see you all in the future. Thanks.